In 1924, Virginia passed a law so powerful it could erase your entire identity. Black families, Native communities, entire histories were wiped off the record. But why? They wanted to control who counted as white. Stay with me because what you're about to learn will change the way you see American history and maybe even your own story.
You state that this mother is white. We are warning you of the penalty in connection with making false statements. If so, she cannot be classed as white under the new law. They're writing the people. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero. Thank you so much for being with me here on my channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. And today, we're going to dive into some history that I'm guessing most people know nothing about. We're going to talk about the Virginia racial integrity laws. And these, believe it or not, are not just from the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s. No, they're from the 1900s, 1924 to be exact. Legal attempts to create racial purity in the United States. What does that even mean? But before I can tell you about what happened in 1924, we actually do need to go back in time a little bit. So imagine standing in a courtroom fighting not just for your freedom, but for the right to exist as you are. In 1773, Rachel Finley, a woman of Native American descent, did just that. Now, Rachel's story happened in Virginia, a place that was deeply concerned about maintaining and controlling racial purity. By 1662, so while it was still a British colony, the General Assembly had passed a law that declared children would inherit the status of their mother. And this is what it said. All children born in this country shall be held bond or free only according to the condition of the mother. So if the mother was enslaved, the children are enslaved. If the mother is free, supposedly, the children would be freed. This law ensured that slavery was not just a practice, but an institution that would be passed down through generations. Let me say that again. At this point, as a British colony, slavery was not just a legal practice. It was an institution that was passed down generationally. Let's let that sit for a second. She stood in front of a judge in Powhatan County, Virginia, and argued that she and her children were not slaves and they weren't property, but they should be free because they had Native heritage. The court did rule in her favor, recognizing her family's connection to indigenous roots, but that wasn't the end of her fight. Within months of victory, Rachel and her children were kidnapped and sold again into slavery, and they were forced to live the very fate that she tried to escape. So centuries after Rachel's fight for her freedom, for her children's freedom, Virginia would take its obsession with racial control to new extremes. Yes, it can get worse. In 1924, Dr. Walter Plecker, a registrar of the Bureau of Vital Statistics, championed something called the Racial Integrity Act. We're going to talk about that. Now, if you've done family history, genealogy work, you're probably familiar with the vital statistics part of the government. If you're not, basically, these are the people that you apply for birth certificates. You get death certificates from. There's marriage certificates. And so you usually have to provide some sort of identity proof of who you are. Well, this man was in charge of that. And so I want to show you couple documents that I printed out, and I'll put them on the screen. But this one is the Virginia Health Bulletin. It is from March 1924, so not that long ago. And it says, Walter W.A. Plecker, MD, he's the state registrar of Vital Statistics, Richmond, Virginia. And this is what it says. Senate Bill 219. To preserve racial integrity, passed the House March 8th, 1924, and is now a law of the state. So I'm just going to start before we even get into what's what. All the folks who like to brigade videos and saying, why do you care about this old stuff? This stuff doesn't matter. This is so old. Move on from your life. The future is bright. Yes, I do think the future is bright, but A, this is a history channel, so we're going to talk about history. But B, 1924 is not that long ago. We're talking a law of a state. Actually, this is only 100 years ago. Wow, it's crazy. So let me read this law to you. This bill aims at correcting a condition which only the more thoughtful people of Virginia know the existence of. I'm going to cry reading this. I'm going to cry reading this document. I've read this. I've never read it out loud. I think sometimes reading words out loud, well, I know this. It's powerful. It's powerful to read stuff out loud. It is estimated that there are, in the state of Virginia, from 10,000 to 20,000, possibly more, near white people who are known to possess an intermixture of colored blood. In some cases, to a slight extent, it is true, but it is still enough to prevent them from being white. In the past, it has been possible for these people to declare themselves as white, or even to have the court so declare them. Then they have demanded the admittance of their children into the white schools, and in not a few cases have intermarried with white people. In many counties, they exist as distinct colonies, holding themselves aloof from Negroes, but not being admitted by the white people as of their race. In any large gathering or school of colored people, especially in the cities, many will be observed who are scarcely distinguishable as colored. I'm going to pause right here. If you haven't seen, the very beginning work of my channel, it started as just a family documentary researching my mom's family. Her grandmother came from Louisiana, and I got a rude introduction to phrases like passing for white, passe blanc. This whole idea of struggling to be seen as white. What does this mean? How does this happen? How can you pass for something if you're not? Or what are all of this stuff? Who counts as white? These are the big questions that, as a historian, before this, I never asked, because I didn't know they needed to be asked this way. And then as I begin studying my family history, I realized these are questions that need to be asked. We may not have the answer, but we still need to ask the question. And so as I'm reading this, it's just such a cold, calculated, medical feel to this document. It gives me goosebumps. These persons, however, are not white in reality. This goes on. Nor by the new definition of this law, that a white person is one with no trace of blood of another race, except, and here's the only exception, that a person with 1/16 of American Indian, if there's no other race mixture, may be classed as white. Their children are likely to revert to the distinctly Negro type even when all apparent evidence of the mixture has disappeared. But you definitely see things pop up where you're like, okay, this is going to give you away. If you were trying to get in with a certain group, it would give you away. The Virginia Bureau of Vital Statistics has been called upon within 1 month for evidence by 2 lawyers employed to assist people of this type to force their children into the white public schools, and by another employed by the school trustees of a district to prevent this action. So this is one document. There's more on this, but I just want to read this one page to you. So Plecker believed that these so-called near-white individuals, were a threat. So his solution was to force everyone in Virginia, because that was his only jurisdiction, was Virginia, to be classified as either white or colored. So he eliminated the category of Native American altogether. So he wrote this letter, and it's from the Bureau of Vital Statistics, State Board of Health. I'll put it up on the screen as well. So this is not just a law that never saw the light of day. It's on the books, but it's not being used. No, this is a letter that a woman received from Walter Plecker. Dear Madame, our volume 1425-14089 is your certificate for the birth of an illegitimate child, Dewey Hubert Hartless, child of Martha Louise Hartless, born March 20th, 1924 at Fairfield. So he's referencing a birth certificate that they have on file. You state that this mother is white. We had occasion to write you some time ago in reference to giving the correct color on the birth certificate. We are warning you of the penalty in connection with making false statements. The Hartless family from Amherst County belongs to the mixed people, Indian, white, and colored, and under the new racial integrity law cannot be classed as white unless this is someone entirely separate from the Amherst Irish Creek connection. We want further information from you as to whether she's connected with these people. If so, she cannot be classed as white under the new law. They're writing the people and saying, hey, we think that these documents are wrong. Do you have the scoop on this person's ancestry? We want to make adjustments. We want to change it from white to colored. Write us at once, he writes. We want to again warn you of the trouble you are liable to get yourself into if you do not give the correct color. feel so angry. I feel so angry. I want to finish this in a second. Let me tell you, I feel so angry because we're in a national dialogue right now. And I don't feel like I fit in either camp. I'm going to tell you why. On one side, there are people saying, America has never been a racist country. We've never had an issue with that. Well, I can see right here that's not the case. These are letters that your grandparents may have gotten. On the other hand, there's this other camp where it says, like, America is only a racist country and has never been anything good. The history is not as good as some want to make it out to be, and the present situation is not as bad as I think some want to make it out to be. But I think that's where the dialogue is getting lost. We're not having a dialogue together. This is real. This is real. These letters, this is not the only one in existence. It's just the one I'm sharing with you right now. And whether you have this background or not, I think it's really important to put our family story in historical context. Write us at once. We want to again warn you of the trouble you are liable to get yourself into if you do not give the correct color. It is my duty to see that this law is obeyed, and I expect to do it. I'm waiting for someone who violates this law to have them in court. If you want to be the first one, we'll give you a chance. Yours very truly, Walter Plecker, State Registrar. What does this mean? Why do we study this? One, I think studying this is of vital importance because it helps us either understand our own family story, why our families chose to behave certain ways, why did they move, why did they tell us things, why did they lie, why did they do this, why did they do that? Okay, here's one reason. The other thing is it creates empathy for each other. We don't all have the same family experience. And you know that, right? You know people who maybe when you're a kid, you went to their house and you're like, wow, this family's messed up. I'm really glad that like I can go home to my family. Or maybe it was the reverse. You would go to someone's house and you're like, wow, my family's really messed up. I wish I could just stay at this friend's house forever. And so we know inherently that not everybody has had the same experience as us in life. And that is so true, especially when we ask questions, well, why is that? Why are they in the spot that they're in? Well, what was their family experience that brought them there? I think sometimes we are so forward focused or we're so focused on the present moment that we don't really look back to create context. And I think that's true in our lives, our relationships, our history as a country. They went after people, and then you said, well, what's the big deal if the birth certificate is changed? Well, back then, a lot. I mean, if you were legally classified as colored, especially if you had believed to be white, or maybe you didn't really think you were white, but you had been, whatever the reason, not being able to get jobs, not being able to live in certain areas, not being able to go to a certain church, not being able to associate freely. And this is just an incredible, and I think incredibly under-discussed and purposefully ignored part of this story. And I think one of the reasons it's so important is because it's so documented. It's so specific. We're talking about a law and how it was implemented. We have a huge paper record. This isn't 200 years ago. This isn't 300 years ago. Look at, they're typing on a typewriter. It's not that long ago, right? What is racial integrity? What is racial integrity? Why does it matter? What does it mean for today? And I think also as you're doing family work, especially in the US, we have the census records that list the race, and sometimes that, at least for my family, it's changed from black to mulatto to white to Mexican, which isn't a race, but that's still what we get put sometimes. And this is the context for it. This is what was going on for our family, for neighbors, for people in the community. But it also gives me pause because I did a video with my husband, maybe it was the last video that was out. And so many people in the comments were like shocked that my husband identifies as white and that he sees me that way. And I think it's strange because in 2024, we don't really have the same requirements on us to like really know our ancestry to prove, are you white enough to participate in this, or are you going to be excluded, and all of that. You know, 2 generations ago, if anybody had access to anything about our family, we wouldn't have been considered white. That's something that I think is important, not to dwell on it, not to try to become a victim or have some victim mentality or something. No, but I'm a historian, and for some reason, we're allowed to go back 100 years with a lot of other history, but when it comes to stuff like this, I'm told to stop. I'm told to stop looking at it, stop talking at it, stop digging into it. No, absolutely not. So let me know if you want to do a little bit more of a deep dive on this topic. I'm thinking about working through some of these documents, just sit and talk about these documents. Let me know what you think. I did a longer video on Walter Plecker. I can leave a link to that below. And if you'd like to support the work I'm doing, I have not been taking sponsors and things like that because my content is not only controversial, but I need to be able to speak about it the way that I think it needs to be spoken about. I can't be worried about holding back because I have an ad in the middle of my video. It's just, I can't. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. It does take away a lot of the income that would normally support a channel of my size. So if you'd love to support the work I'm doing, you can join on Patreon. I like to have conversations over there, post stuff I'm working on, or check out my website, NYTNashville.com, and grab some merch or some I have some free downloads over there for saving your family story. But let me know what you think about this. Do you want to dive more into some of these documents? I'm just feeling the itch to just start getting back into the documents again. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, we'll talk soon.